In this video, I'm going to show you the 5 most common rig mistakes that I've seen anglers make here over the last 12 years at Beausoleil. And these are mistakes that can cost you a fish. So I'm going to break each one down in detail. I'm going to show you what the implications are of doing it in a particular way. Make sure you watch until the end, because I'm going to share with you the biggest mistake that I think I've made and how I changed my rigs to catch more consistently. I want to have a chat about the knotless knot. Now, 20 odd years ago, when I got back into modern carp fishing, I wasn't catching anything off the bottom. I'd learned how to catch carp off the surface, but that's a completely different game. I walked into my local tackle shop and I showed them the rigs that I was using, and the feedback was basically that I was tying the knotless knot wrong. And by wrong, I mean the hook link was exiting out of the back of the hook rather than the front. And this is a mistake that I see a number of times a year, and honest to God, it'll absolutely ruin your chances of getting a pickup. I know that there are guys that fish this way and say they catch a few, but I really don't believe that if you want consistent results, and when you start fishing for harder carp to catch and larger carp, that you're going to do any good by tying the knotless knot in this fashion. So that is the knotless knot tied incorrectly, and the hook link is actually exiting out the back of the hook rather than the front. So I've just laid that rig in my hand like that. The hook's on the side, and I'm going to trap the hook link material. I'm just going to raise my hand, and you'll see that the hook starts to drag, and then the hook actually turns away from my palm rather than into my palm. If the carp moves on that side, it can hook them in the scissors, but more often than not, it's just going to flip away from the bottom lip and it's going to actually turn the hook upside down, and that is absolutely not what we want. I'm not saying that the knotless knot tied this way is never going to work. Sure, it will occasionally catch the odd carp, but 9 times out of 10 it's going to flip the wrong way and you're going to get spat out. If you tie it the other way, with the hook link exiting the front side of the hook, you're absolutely going to catch more carp and convert more bites into carp on the bank. You can see that tied this way, the hook sits at a very different angle. On the palm test, you can see that the hook reacts very differently. When I trap the hook link and I raise up the baits, the hook immediately wants to turn over and grab, and it grabs about 20-30 mil back. And that is the difference between converting a lot more chances to carp on the bank. I want to have a chat about pop-ups. The big problem is anglers not using a sufficiently large counterweight in order to properly sink that pop-up. If you don't add enough weight to a pop-up, what you're going to be doing is fishing with a short zig. Now, if you want to actually present a pop-up up in the weed, then use a pop-up, don't add a pop-up weight, and it'll work great. On a really clean spot, the last thing you want to do is present your bait 6-8 inches up off the deck. You want the bait right down where the carp are feeding on the bottom. I think one of the reasons why I see this mistake is that as rigs get more complicated and we add a bit of this and a bit of that, it changes the way that pop-ups react. And you've got to take all these factors into consideration. The good news is it's really easy to fix. All you need is a simple test tank or a bucket. So I've just knocked up a simple mono hair rig here and loaded a 15mm Scopex squid pop-up on it. So as we can see, that pop-up is very buoyant and it's going to take some weight to sink it. So I'm going to add a tungsten extra large sinker to see if that's enough to sink this pop-up. And we can see that that's better, but there's no way that that sinker by itself is enough to sink that pop-up. If you were using something like a 10mm pop-up, one of those XL sinkers might have been enough. There are also other options in that type of product available which may well have done the job. I don't have any of that available, so I'm going to go old school and I'm just going to use a AA split shot. There we go, sinks like an absolute stone. When I'm using pop-ups, I want them absolutely nailed to the deck like that. I don't want them floating around, wafting around. I want them absolutely nailed. When you start getting into things like stiff hinge rigs, it can get even more complicated. Not only have you got slight variations in the size of the pop-up, you've got different hooks, you've got different weights of swivels, different sizes of swivel, and it can all get quite involved. If you change one of these things just fractionally, then your pop-up can go from being on the bottom to being a short zig. So it really is best to test every one you do. So I've just knocked up a simple stiff hinge rig here, and rather than use something like a split shot, I've used a swivel knot bead. These are available in a couple of sizes. This is the small one. They do come in a larger size. It's a very neat solution if you want to get into the stiff hinge rig. You can mount it in different positions. I could have put it on the boom there, but I've chosen to put it above the swivel just there. So it does sink just about, but I can see there's a little bit of bob still left in that. If that pop-up was fractionally bigger, then that could easily lift up and we'd be in trouble. I've done a larger one here, and I've upped the hook size to a size 6 shod twister, and I've used the larger swivel knot bead. Drop that in, and there we can see absolutely sinks like a brick, and that's what I want to see when I'm using a pop-up. If you're going to get into using pop-ups, do overshot them. It's far better to overshot them than have them kind of just on the edge, because if you make one little tiny change, or the next pop-up is slightly smaller in diameter, it's going to turn from a nice pop-up into a short zig, and if you're on a clean spot, you can completely ruin your chances of getting a bite. Let's have a chat about quick links. Now, the use of quick links is very popular in carp fishing, but there is a way to use them and a way not to use them. First of all, I'm going to use one in a way that I wouldn't recommend, because it can absolutely cost you a fish. So I've just taken a quick link here and I've put it on the end of some Klingon leader. Then I'm going to take a rig, I'm going to hook it on the quick link like that. You might think, well, what's wrong with that? That's never going to fail, right? Watch what happens. If that loop is large, as I've done it there, you're going to get all sorts of movement on the bottom during the casting, whatever. If that gets round to there, then it comes under tension when it's pulled by a fish. That's going to happen. That's going to slide round to there. Now, if there's any kind of leverage during the fight, that has only got to slip round to that point there, and it's off. So I'm not saying that this is going to cost you a fish every time, but there is going to be that one time, possibly when it matters the absolute most, when it's going to come back and bite you. The good news is that this mistake is really easy to fix. All I do is take a standard silicone sleeve, I cut them in two, then I take my rig, thread the sleeve onto the loop, add the hook link back on, and simply slide the silicone sleeve onto the quick link. There we go, very safe, very simple, very secure. So no matter what happens during the fight, there's no way that that hook link is moving. What you really need to focus on is making sure that the silicone sleeve is a few millimeters over the hook link, because it's the movement in the hook link that you want to stop. Another type of quick link are these quick change uni swivels. I've tested a few of these products from different manufacturers over the years. I can tell you that there's quite a big difference in the exact details of this geometry. This one here from Nash is really quite tightly closed. When I pull a hook link into it, I really have to pull it on quite hard to get that hook link to hook on properly. You can absolutely get away with using that like that, but if that hook link was thinner, or the quick change swivel that you're using isn't as tightly closed as that, you could have a problem. Again, it's an easy fix for this problem. All you need is one of these anti-tangle sleeves. This is a little short tungsten one. Thread them on a needle, thread that over the hook link, and take the quick change swivel, hook it on the loop, then simply slide the anti-tangle sleeve over the top. So this actually does two jobs. It adds extra stiffness there, which is why they're called anti-tangle sleeves, but it also makes it virtually impossible for that hook link to come disconnected from the quick change swivel. One mistake I see regularly is anglers not testing their knots. If you've never had a knot fail, then it might be hard for you to believe that this could ever be an issue. If you go to a new water or you change hook link materials or mainline materials, the knots can become the weakest link in the chain and they can cost you a fish. The first issue is what knot you're using with what material. Certain knots work well with coated materials, others will work well with monofilament materials, and others work well with braid. It's complicated and I've had to learn this the hard way. A good example of this problem is the half blood knot. Now the half blood knot is fantastic for connecting monofilament mainline to a swivel. But if you try and use that same knot in coated braid, you'll find it's very difficult to cinch down, to tighten down that knot. Because what's going to happen is that coating is going to fracture and it's going to completely ruin the stiff effect that you're trying to achieve when exiting the swivel. It's a different issue again with braid. Cinching it down is quite easy, but if you cut your tag end too short, when that knot comes under pressure, you'll find that it breaks quite easily. So what this means is if you're only using one knot to make all your connections, when you start to explore, get deeper into your fishing, fish for larger fish, go to bigger waters, etc., you might run into problems. And knots which were working for you for smaller carp on smaller waters all of a sudden are letting you down. The other problem I see on a regular basis is anglers might be tying the knot right, but they're not tightening it down right. And if you don't tighten the knot down, if you don't cinch that knot down, it's going to fail, and it's going to fail way sooner than what it says on the tin. To tighten a knot correctly, you are going to need a few tools, but they're quite simple and they don't cost much. So this is how not to do it. Here I am just tying the knot normally. I'm holding the swivel with my fingers and I'm just pulling the line with my other hand. And if that's your version of a tightened knot, then you're going to be in trouble. The problem with doing it this way is the knot is going to slip when it's under load. And when it slips, you get an increase in friction, and the friction creates heat, and it literally will melt through the line. It might sound a bit mad, but that's the actual mechanics of knot failure in monofilament line. The good news is it's very easy to do it properly. All you need to do is tie the knot in the correct way. When you get to this stage, you need to grab your rig puller, wrap the line around the lighter, and then wet the knot. Bring it up to your chest and so slowly cinch it down. You need to be really slow. And when you get to that point, you can start to give it little pulses, dunk, 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 to really nestle it down. So that's a perfectly cinched down and tested half blood knot. And you can see it goes into a slight taper. I can't emphasize enough how hard I pull. I'm putting at least 15-17 pounds on 20-pound mainline in order to fully cinch it down. Now you might be worried, but isn't that going to damage the line? Well, no, it really shouldn't. If you're doing this right, you are going to get a few failures. Every knot I tie is certainly not perfect, and I do break quite a few. But the point is that once I've tightened it and I've tested it, when I put it out in a fishing situation, I've got a tremendous amount of confidence that that knot is not going to be the reason why I lose that fish. Hook sharpness is absolutely everything in carp fishing, and carp hooks are very delicate. It's no good inspecting them or hand sharpening them and then damaging them before they even get to where they need to be, which is on that spot ready for a carp to pick it up. You need to take the utmost care with the hook and with the rig while you're getting ready to either cast it out or row it out or drop it out in a bait boat. The other classic one is messing up the cast first try. It happens, not every cast is going to be perfect. If you don't bail out of that cast and stop the lead before it's touched the bottom, then you really need to re-inspect that hook to make sure that you haven't damaged it in any way. If you miss your cast, let the lead fall through the water and the lead touches the bottom. It's no good waiting a few seconds and thinking, I wasn't quite happy with that. I'm going to wind it in. If you do that, you're going to have to re-inspect that hook and worst case scenario, resharpen it. The biggest mistake that I think you can make in carp fishing is making your rigs too complicated, especially when the situation doesn't justify it. I know rigs like the Stiff Hinge and the Ronnie catch carp. I'm not denying that at all. But for me, complicated rigs will not catch you more carp than simple rigs. The more complicated a rig is, the more chances there are of getting something wrong, of making that small but vital mistake that will completely ruin your chances of catching anything. I have total faith in basic rigs like the hair rig and the Mono D. They're simple, quick to tie, they've been around forever and they're always going to work. Click the link to the video on the screen right now to watch my video on how to tie the Mono hair rig.